Okay, all, welcome to my first fly tying video. This video is to show a couple of things. First off, how to tie the bunny bait fish, and secondly, we're also going to experiment with how to tie a weed guard on. So, what I have here in front of me is I have a Peak rotary vise. I have an Eagle Claw 4/0 size model 254 hook that does have a large ringed eye, if you notice that. With this particular style of weed guard, it is much easier to tie with a large eye like this if you're not used to tying it. So tying this kind. So I would recommend you start here, but you can do it with any other style of fly tying hook. We're also going to use a natural magnum sized rabbit zonker, a white rabbit zonker, red 3D eyes, and a little bit of flash. This is actually a product called Widow's Web, Pearl Web, I believe, from the Fly Tires Dungeon. And size 210 denier thread. I'm using red just so it shows up well in the video. We're also going to have a short section of, I want to say it's 40-pound test monofilament. Any really stiff, hard monofilament will work. Maxima, if you're building leader butts, in a 30-pound test will work very well for you. So, with no further ado, we're going to start by wrapping down the hook, just like in every other video I'm sure you've watched. This is all just foundation underlayment type stuff. You don't have to get terribly worried about it. I do use a straight razor for some of my cutting just because I need it later for the rabbit zonkers. So, move my vise away from the computer so it doesn't wiggle quite so much. I'm going to wrap just up to the point of the hook, and that's where my first tie-in is going to start. I'm going to use this heavy monofilament, and I'm going to start by making just a couple of wraps over the tag end. Now this is important because we do make a loop on here to help support the tail of this fly so it doesn't wrap around our hook when we're backcasting. That will ruin your fishing experience in a big hurry. Now we want the loop to be approximately the length of the shank of the hook. So we're going to start there, lay it out. We'll make a couple real light wraps over top of it, and we'll clip it off. The reason we clip it off just a hair high is so that we can adjust it right now, because later when you get more proficient at this, you shouldn't have to adjust it as much. We're going to make sure both are situated approximately parallel on the hook shank, like that, if you can see that. And then I'm going to also take that line, I'm going to go back through the middle, and this is going to be my weed guard. Now, by tying everything in lightly at this point, I've allowed myself to adjust the length of this loop if I feel it's necessary, which this one looks pretty good. I don't think I'm going to have to adjust it much. But what you can do is you can take a pair of forceps or your bare fingers if you haven't tightened it down too tight, and you can pull this loop to make it shorter if necessary. Now, I'm going to wrap the whole thing smoothly, tightly, and I'm going to cut my tag end that I left for adjustment off with a pair of scissors. I'm going to take this long piece that I left out, and I'm going to slide it through the hole between the jaws of the vise, down under the hook, and leave it pointed down along the shank of the hook. Now, since I know I'm not going to need more than, say, that much of it, I'm going to cut it off. It's approximately 4 or 6 inches long. Now, this strength of line can be bought a lot of times at your local sporting goods store if they have a bulk line sales where they'll put line on your reel. I bought this particular one at a store like that, and it was, I think, 5 cents a yard or something like that. You just ask them for a few yards of the heaviest thing that they have, and generally that'll work just fine. Now I've wrapped down to the end of down to the curve of the hook here, and what I do want to do is I want to go around a couple of times just to prop that loop up, because I've got to continue wrapping down along the shank or the weed guard won't sit right. And so now that that's there, I'm going to reposition the hook just a hair. I'm going to turn it up on end, and I'm going to keep wrapping so that my weed guard line is just perfectly parallel with the back of the hook shank. It should just ride right along the top of that. Now all this is doing is serving as a base for my glue that I'm going to use to hold the whole thing together. Now this fly is also rather overbuilt because glue-wise, because it is intended to catch things with teeth. So I'm going to wrap about halfway down to the curve of the hook, come back up, a couple more wraps across, reposition the hook in the vise, and we're ready to go. Now the first thing I'm going to do once I've got it back up here is I'm going to cement everything I've done so far with just a little bit of brush on super glue. This happens to be Loctite brand brush on super glue, and this will help hold everything, bond everything together so that we don't have any premature failure from teeth. Okay, now the next step is we're going to add a little bit of flash in, and so this material happens to come in these 8-inch hanks. I'm going to take that length of material and separate out just a few strands, and because I happen to like a big gaudy fly for throwing at northerns, I'm going to clip off a pretty good chunk. Make sure my glue is fairly dry. And I'm going to tie in at about the 2/3 point here. Let it face over the top of the hook. And then fold it back. Now, next is going to come my tail. I've got this rabbit strip here. It's pre-cut. It's fairly long. This happens to be probably 6 or 7 inches long. Maybe 5 inches long. So I'm going to separate the hairs so that I can see the bare hide on the rabbit strip like this. I'm going to place that down right where I folded the tie-in over for the rabbit strip. It happens to be just damp enough with glue that there's I'll put a little tiny drop more glue right there. I'll put just a drop of glue right there to help hold it in case the threads get cut. Slick those hairs back just a little bit and give it a nice sturdy overwrap. Now what this has done is we've got our flash, and this strip here helps to hold the tail from falling over. I'm going to fold that back and build the body of our fly. I'm also going to pull this out of here for right now. Okay, and the body of our fly is going to start with this white strip. I have to clip just a little bit of the fur off the end of it to get a good tie into the face of the fly. Now you can do this two ways. You can either do it so that the hair is all facing forward when you rotate it, or you can face it backwards when you rotate it. It's up to you. Personally, I like to face them forward so that they flare as the fly comes to rest. I'll put just a little coating of glue on there. I'll start with my strip, unfortunately with my big hand in front of the camera. Run my thread down, quick half hitch into the holder, and then we'll let the rotary do its thing for us. Overlay your rabbit so that you get a nice dense body. This fly does happen to cast rather like a pork chop. It's very good for 8-weight rods or so. I wouldn't throw it on anything less than a 7-weight if you're making them in any kind of size. So, just FYI. I like to put a little glue on so that the strip holds very, very, very firmly to the hook shank, because this is the only thing that's going to bond it to the shank, is that little bit of glue. Now we're going to come all the way up to the eye, and we can actually encroach on the eye a bit compared to what you would with your normal flies, because this is such a large-eyed fly. With that big ringed eye, you don't have to worry about that quite as much. And I'll start my wraps, comb the fur back, and now that it's held in place, I'll use that razor to cut very close to the edges of the thread, and I'll give it a nice solid wrap down. Okay.